Good afternoon, all. This is Anushri from People Matters, and we are back with another exciting session of our webcast in partnership with SAP Success Factors on the topic What After Rejecting the Bell Curve? Effective talent management is becoming exceedingly crucial with the changing times, and an effective performance management system can play a vital role in it. The much debated bell curve was done away within most organizations, while some still consider it a useful tool. This webcast by People Matters and SAP answers the most sought question of what is the alternative to the bell curve? Has discarding the bell curve really worked? How are organizations determining pay and promotions after discarding the rating systems? And what is the way forward for performance management systems? To take us through their expert views, we have with us today Mr. Gajendra Chandel, President and CHRO of Tata Motors. With over 25 years of experience, Gajendra has worked with various organizations in India, Germany, and USA. At Tata Motors, he has actively driven transformation programs through various strategic growth initiatives of the company. He has also set up 4 focused academies to build top-class product, customer, operations, and management leadership talent. Gajendra is also honored with Leader of the Year award in 1997 by LMI Incorporation USA. Welcome, Mr. Chandel.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Great. We also have with us Mr. Anindya Shi. He is the VP and Global Head at Cipla. At Cipla, he is leading the corporate HR team of organization effectiveness, talent management, HR technology and analytics, shared service, and governance. With over 15 years of experience, his area of expertise includes talent management, compensation and employee benefits design, employee engagement, shared services, organization design, and job evaluation and productivity improvement. Welcome, Mr. Anindya Shi. And to moderate the session, we have Nitya Nandini, Senior HR Value Advisor at SAP. With over 13 years of HR experience in organizational transformation and human capital management consulting, she has extensive experience working in different growth markets with customers ranging from greenfield to large conglomerate across industries. She is also a certified compensation and benefits manager from Carlton Advanced Management Institute, USA. Welcome, Nitya.
Thank you.
Great. So we have, for our participants, we have time for you to ask your questions at the end of this webcast. For those who are live, can simply post questions at any time during session in the comment section on your right side of the screen. Our experts will try to respond to as many questions as time allows. So without any further delay, let me invite Mr. Gajendra, Anindya, and Nitya to take over. Over to you, Nitya.
Thanks, Anushri. So without much delay, I would like to start off with directly moving on to the topic. As we are aware that most of the organizations have considered rejecting the bell curve or continuing to adopt it for effective talent management. I would like to understand from both our speakers today, one of which has continued to adopt the bell curve and one of which has considered to reject the bell curve. And since this concept has come in with close to 2 years ago, we'd like to understand how this has been implemented in the first place and how it has worked. So over to you, Mr. Gajendra. Can you tell us what rejecting the bell curve has actually done to your organization, and has life become simpler? And a little more about what are the challenges you had to go through in this process. We can't hear you, sir.
Mr. Gajendra, can you hear us?
Hello?
Yes, now we can.
Hello?
Yes, sir, now we can hear you.
Yeah, they were not able to. What's the question?
Okay. The question is the concept of rejecting the bell curve. How easy was it for you to consider this and implement this? and what are the challenges that you faced? And has your life as the CHRO improved, or has it thrown in new challenges for you after rejecting the bell curve?
Yeah, I think so. I have seen both sides, the times of bell curve and the times without the bell curve. So we have done away with the bell curve only 2 years back, without going and announcing that we have done away with it, actually. Internally, of course, in the organization, we said that we are moving over to a new performance plan and performance review process, which is normally called as performance management system. 2 years back, we said that we need define our targets of the individuals much more tightly and much more sharply in line with the organizational balance scorecard, which is in line, of course, with the organization strategy of the next 3 years. Okay. So, to put it straight and simple, life has become somewhat better on one hand, a little bit tougher on the other. Better in the sense that people don't now hanker after that where you are on the bell curve, on which end of the bell curve you are, or you are in the middle of the bell curve, or whatever it used to be. Because we used to have that 5 distinct points in the bell curve. So we have done away with that. At the same time, the rating system we have reinforced, actually. Individual targets are set in what we normally call as line of sight with the scorecard of the subunit or the business unit that the individual is placed in. And there is a very tight control through audits of the targets which are in line with the scorecard. So, and we have seen that when we moved over for the first time in the first year, the aggregate score of the organization or the individuals in the organization was somewhere around little over 100%. Whereas if we looked at our scorecard as a whole, organization as a whole, we were hardly at 65th percentile. So we had to send it back to the people and asking them that it has to be closer and in line with the scorecards of their respective units. So the gap was bridged to a certain extent. This year, when we did it for the second year, we found that the gap has reduced considerably. And that gap, we understand there will always be gap. It will never be perfect. That at the company balance scorecard level, if you are at 100, and the aggregation of the targets of each individual in terms of their ratings will also be 100. So it is in plus minus 10 category, which is a normal scenario. So people are happy that there is no bell curve. Their performance is rated more realistically in line with the targets, which are in line with the scorecard of the organization. So on one hand, people have to do much more by way of the quality of the targets. On the other hand, and not only the targets, but also the reviews. But on the other hand, having done away with the bell curve, they are happy that subjectivity has been taken out. Far more objectivity in the process system has been brought in.
Okay. Sounds like it's actually like a double-edged sword, which helps you as well as you need to be a little more careful about how to rate the employees. So thank you so much, sir. Now I'd like to move to Mr. Anindya, and I wanted to understand more from you in terms of though so many organizations had adopted rejection of the bell curve, what made you stick on to still keeping the bell curve concept?
Okay. Now, while we have not rejected the bell curve, but what we have done is we have simplified the bell curve. What does it mean is that we earlier had a 4 or almost a 5-point rating scale, and people really struggled to maintain the bell curve. So instead of that, we have just defined the extreme. We said that the excellent guys cannot be more than 15%, not more than 15%. And we said that and you need to create a bottom 10%, not less than 10%. And everybody else is in the middle. And we are considering all of the people who are in the middle as great performers. So we simplified the curve instead of people struggling to find whether the person is a 1 or a 2 or a 3 or a 4 or 5 in the absence of very accurate measures of performance. We said, okay, managers, can you identify your excellent people and you identified the laggards? And most of the managers says, yeah, we can do that. We are very clear about who our excellent guys are, and we are very clear who our laggards are. And everybody else is in the middle. So to that extent, we have simplified the bell curve. Now, what the bell curves helps is that, especially for large teams and where managers are at different level of their evolution, it helps them to us to do almost a statistical quality control. If suppose there's a team of 100 people and we know that, of course, at least 9 to 10% are the bottom performers, are 10 to 15% are in the top performers, we know that the process has been followed well. So where the visibility is not there and the numbers are large, the bell curves is a surrogate of the process quality. And that is the reason why we have kept the bell curve in the system.
Okay. Which leads me to the next question. How do you actually make sure that you avoid inaccuracies in this process? Because you said that it's directly proportional to the, directly related to the process quality. So say, for example, a manager who has hundreds of employees in his team, a HOD, and another HOD who has maybe, say, just 10 members in his or her team. The one with the smaller set of employees, it will be easier for them to differentiate between high performers and low performers and put them directly in your simplified bell curve. Whereas for the one who is in the bigger bracket of managing a huge chunk of employees, the conversation becomes difficult, and also there will be so many more layers of managers and all of them need to be educated. How did you go about that?
So we are in the third year of this practice. So luckily what we have found in our experience is that managers have understood the concept pretty well, because when we ask them that, okay, you pick the people who, if you cross your hearts, you'll be able to defend, not only in your team, but if with your customers, with your internal stakeholders, that these are your best guys, and with you can cross your hearts, you can tell that, okay, these are the guys who are not pulling their weight. So, and everybody else, we say that, okay, fine, they're doing well, and they need to be, they're solid guys, and they need to be in the system. And that language, all the managers have understood. They have not come back to us, and they said it's pretty simple enough, and we can actually identify both ends of the curve, right? That is one. Second, what we have added the thing is that we have added the value element. So we have done an exercise which we call the first principles, and we have identified what are some of the behaviors which we are going to emphasize within the organization. And we said that, okay, not only the what of the performance, but the how of the performance is also important. And please use both the what and the how to identify the two ends of the curve. So is the positive part of the curve is the person a role model? The negative part is the person somebody who doesn't belong to the system? So by asking a series of questions, we are asking the managers to differentiate talent.
Right. This is interesting to actually combine the what and the how of performance. So when you are educating your managers in the beginning of the year and also the end of the year, would you be sending them out these principles so that they are more aware of it whenever they are going through this rating process as well as performance appraisal process?
Yeah, so we do it in 3-4 stages. First, we do what is called a shared goals exercise. And that is the top 50, 60 of the organization. Every year we bring them together. And then they said, okay, how can we work together? Whose input is required for the success of whose output? So you understand the value network. And the fact that you belong to the entire organization, and everybody, while they are individually accountable, but together we need to win. So that is the first principle we emphasize. And then we train both the leaders and the HR that, okay, again, we are starting the new process and these are the principles we have to follow. This is the principle of goal setting. This is the principle of shared accountability. And this is the principle of differentiation. And once we train the top 50 guys and the HR, they cascade it throughout the organization.
Okay, okay. That's great. So I have a question from the audience, sir, for you. One is, how do you provide an increment to the group of people who fall under the middle of the bell curve?
Okay. Yeah. From an increment purpose, there is, while we have the same level, the top guys, we call it A star performer, the middle is A, and the remaining bottom guy, we call it the Z performers. But for increment, there is a finer scale which is there, which goes into a multiplier. But that scale is something which is not diverged to the employee. So it is just used for distributing the kitty.
Okay, okay. So can you tell us a bit more about what is the role of this process? I understand that you have streamlined it, tried to make it simple, as well as educate your managers at different levels to do it in a more streamlined top to bottom approach. What was the role of technology in the entire performance evaluation process, and how did you use that to impact or improvise your entire turnaround time as well as the quality of the performance management process?
Okay, right. So the entire platform, including the right from the goal setting form to the interim review and the final annual exercise, this entirely it's configured in the SuccessFactors platform, and we are getting, like for example, this time we goal setting, we have got a 98% completion across the world, 26,000 employees, and the 2% mostly which are there are the people who are mostly on the PIPs, performance improvement programs, or some of the exit and absconding cases. So more or less we have a 100% completion in the system. So what it helps us is that it helps us to track which of the managers and which part of the organizations are how they're performing. And it also helps the managers and the HR to nudge in case there are certain parts of the organization which is either from a process completion point, they are not performing well, or from an overall from a business perspective, they are lagging behind, and they are also lagging behind in performance. So it helps us to get the dashboards so that we can follow up and get those completed in time.
Sure. Sure. So it's quite interesting because with the same performance management module of the software SAP SuccessFactors, I understand that the way you use it for running it with your people, with your talent, and the way Mr. Chantel is using for his employees is quite different. But essentially, what I see as a common thread is both of you are trying to rationalize and ratify your rating system, as well as keep things as simple as possible, and try to be more realistic in terms of performance rating so that employees don't get skewed into the bell curve, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you one general question. What do you think is the way forward for performance management systems?
Yeah. So the way forward for performance management, again, it is going to be a whole lot of conversations. I think the focus is going to shift from a very regimented annual ritual and with a regular check-in at the middle of the year to something which is going to be more dynamic. It will be more a continuous kind of a process. It will be very difficult to find out what is the start point and end point of the system, because it will be from a more project to project basis, more dynamic and more real time, if I might say. And it has to be more conversational. That's the direction in which the performance management is going. While obviously there is from a financial cycle or a budgeting cycle, there is an alignment of budgeting cycle onto the performance management, but increasingly these two will get slowly decoupled.
Sure. Thank you so much, sir. I would like to move back to Mr. Gajendra Chandel now. So I have one question from the audience. Mr. Albert asks, was there any fiscal advantage or disadvantage of rejecting the bell curve?
No, it's not about the financial advantage or disadvantage. It's about the culture. It's about if the organization achieves its targets, the individuals achieve their targets, both have to be in sync. See, what used to happen and what normally happens in the bell curves is that you first shoot the arrow and then you draw the target. So people were bracketed, whether you use 5-point scale, 6-point, whatever point scale you use. If the bell curve is the primary driver of the performance management, what normally happens is that you bracket the people at certain points on the bell curve.
Yeah.
And it becomes just relative. And it's not in line with the organizational achievements. So if all the people achieve their targets, the organization must achieve, and the vice versa. So that has been a big advantage that we have seen. And that's how I explained in the beginning itself that the gap between the aggregation of individuals' target achievements vis-a-vis the organizational target achievement, there is a synchronization.
Okay. Absolutely. So we have one more question from the audience to you, sir. Without the bell curve, how do you differentiate performance of employees for justifying rewards and promotions, etc.?
So, number one, it's not just the targets. There are two dimensions of performance management, because performance management is not just about giving financial rewards. It's about a comprehensive individual development plan, which includes rewards on one hand and the development steps of the individuals on the other hand. So we have given 50-50 weightage to the achievement of targets of the individuals, and we have limited the targets of the individuals to 6 at the moment. Maximum it can be 7, not more than that. And all the targets have to be in line with the balanced scorecard. So that's one side. On the other side, we said that this is also a development tool, and therefore we have what we call as leadership practices, or you can call competencies, which are also evaluated and they are discussed between the manager and the employee. So both have 50-50 weightage. So we are able to take care of the individual rewards, which is the what you call as annual performance bonus. The other is the increase of the individuals, which is not just about the performance for the year, but sustained performance over a period of time. And third dimension is the development of the individuals, how they grow in the organization. So all the three are put together, and the what you call as consolidated score is what people look for. And they also, of course, look for what kind of bonus do they get for the year, which is linked to their performance, what kind of increment, because if the individual is expected to grow faster in the organization as part of the development plan, so such individuals will get higher increases vis-a-vis the individuals who are not expected to grow to the next level as fast as somebody else, but are outstanding performers. They will get much higher amount of annual bonus or annual performance reward. And third, of course, is the dimension of the individual's development.
Right.
Yeah.
So what would your advice be, sir, for organizations that do not have a rating system? This is another question from the audience. And further to it, they ask, how can you bring objectivity for people when there are no ratings but just increases?
See, it's very difficult to do that, because then it becomes more of, from the zone of objectivity, it is moving more into subjectivity.
Subjectivity, right.
Yeah. So to a certain degree, we tried that, but it doesn't work actually. People at the end of the day want to know that on a scale of 1 to 10, where do I stand? So that's the first thing they want to know. Then the second step, of course, they want to know is vis-a-vis somebody else, where am I?
Yes.
Yeah, so this is the 40 years old. I am reminded of this ad from Surf, which used to say, And that's the mindset I'm talking about. It has nothing to do actually with the ad, but it's only for explaining it. You remember the surf ad used to be
Yes.
"Uski sari meri sari se safed kyun?"
Kyun?
So it's a comparative mindset which comes in. But doing away with bell curve, I think also releases that pressure of the individuals of comparison with others, because now you are able to see in absolute terms what's your contribution as an individual to the organizational targets. Now, it all depends also on how tightly the targets are and who all have been aligned with when the targets have been set and the targets have been reviewed. So we normally insist on, while the targets are being set in the year beginning, it must be done in intact teams. Yeah, so every individual understands what my targets are, what somebody else's targets are, because for achieving my targets, my other team members, especially my colleagues, yeah, are expected to contribute to my targets as well. So, for example, I may have hiring target if I am a HR partner, for example, but somebody else has to interview and finalize on time. My target is relating to employee experience or stakeholder experience. It's the managers who handle the employees. So they have to also participate in improving the employee experience. And it's not just my role. So when you tie the targets of the individuals tightly with one another, not just what we call as vertical and horizontal alignment, only then it functions much better than if the targets are siloed.
Right. Absolutely. So I want to ask the same question to Mr. Anindya. What would your advice be for organizations that don't have a rating system?
Yeah.
And how can they bring objectivity to the entire process?
Yeah. So again, this rating system was there. It was a managerial tool. We have to understand that finally it was a managerial tool, and again it depends on the maturity of the managers to manage performance, right? And as I said that as we move as a trend towards a real time assessment of performance, and as slowly the time horizon of a performance shrinks from a year to maybe a few weeks on a projectized kind of a basis, this paradigm is slowly getting challenged. But at the same time, it will put a lot of pressure on the managers. They will need to keep performance diaries. They need to keep track of the conversations. They will need to keep track of the critical incidents and have real-time conversations to ensure that people are given feedback, people understand, and they are corrected. The performances are corrected on a real time. It's almost like a coach. It's like a player and a coach in the sports arena, if you can take a direct correlation. But the thing is, fundamentally, it is a shift in mindset. And the shift in mindset is, again, that you are looking at performance enhancement. And the idea is that how do we continuously raise the bar? But unless and until we have this, and the managers, the quality of the managers are suspect, in the other case, then the organization will stare at mediocrity.
Right. So basically, the next step would be to have this more continuous and keep monitoring the employee performance on a regular basis. So I'd like to move back to Mr. Shandel. I want to ask you how technology has helped you in this process of simplifying and keeping it more realistic, and what would you recommend in terms of what are the pointers that any organization should consider when they are using technology as an enabler for performance management system?
So technology has been a great support, if I can say so. One, in terms of when we looked at the horizontal and vertical alignment of the targets, we have, with the help of technology, we have been able to find the gaps and the overlaps both online. Second is, it has helped the managers maintain the diary of their individuals' targets. So it's not just an annual event, not even just the half-yearly event. The managers are able to maintain the notes and they are able to do the
very closely, they are able to carry out what we call as program management of the targets. Yeah, so they are able to do the calibration as well as not just the alignment, but also the tracking and evaluation of individual targets from time to time. So they can decide. They can do it on monthly basis. So depending on the type and the quality of the target, they are able to track what's happening with each of the targets of their team members. And not only that, they are able now even to see that 3-4 months in advance, where are they likely to end the year in terms of the aggregation of the target. So technology has been a great help.
Right, especially considering that as the employee size is quite large, it becomes more difficult for a manager to remember the performance achievements of his team members, right? So
that's correct.
Yeah, right. So I have a follow-up question which has come in from the audience. They want to ask, how do you distribute the kitty in the absence of the bell curve?
So first of all, the aggregate kitty is decided based on the performance of the organization.
Right.
Of course, it goes through the process of board approval, etc., and how do we want to position ourselves vis-a-vis the market, the industry, competition, etc. And then comes the question of distribution. So question of distribution becomes very critical and very sensitive when the industry is doing well and you're not doing well. Yeah, or the industry is not doing so well and you are doing well. So those are tricky situations. Industry is doing much better, economy is doing well, and you are doing even better. Then that question is not so tough to handle because you have large enough kitty to distribute. Now, question only is, how do you distribute that? So in the years when the aggregate kitty is large enough, we have a bigger opportunity, and that's what we have done this year, for example. We have given, first of all, highest increase in the industry this year. And that helped us in differentiating far more the performance of the individuals vis-a-vis what we have been able to do in the past 3-4 years, for example. So that's one. Second is the individuals are rewarded in terms of annual increase, what is called as merit increase. This has two dimensions. One, how is the individual's compensation level vis-a-vis the market median? So people who are at, for example, at say 0.6 or 0.7 of what is called as comp ratio, in those cases, we give much higher percentage. Vis-a-vis if somebody is at 1.3 or 1.4, there it is moderated. Because if at a certain level, the value of the job is a certain X amount, an individual is at 60th percentile of the market, you need to bring the individual faster to 70th, 80th, and 90th percentile. Vis-a-vis if somebody is at already 130, 140, 150, there you start moderating it down because then you are overpaying for that job. So that's one dimension. And then it is superimposed with the performance level of the individual.
Right.
So we construct a table, or we have created a kind of framework which an individual lower level of compensation, higher level of performance get the highest reward vis-a-vis the other way around.
Right. So I'd like to ask Mr. Anantya the same question, though you still have the bell curve. What is the role of how the industry is moving with vis-a-vis your organization performance, and how does that impact you distributing the kitty?
Yeah. So what we do is that obviously, like every year we do an annual survey. So we have the Pharma Forum where we look at what our competitors are paying in the pharma market. At the same time, we look at skills which are sector independent. Like, for example, you have people in strategy, HR, finance, M&A, and all, and they can come virtually from any and every market, right? So it necessarily they need not be industry specific. So for them, we take a broader basket of companies. But for the technical functions which are purely from pharma, we then restrict it to where the catchment area of those skills are. So that this is one of the from a benchmarking perspective, we use the data. Now, so far as the
I think it's echoing.
There's an echo.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So far as the annual increase is concerned, so we use two parameters, as Mr. Chandel was also mentioning. We look at the compa ratio, the current positioning of the person on the role base, where the person and the role is fitting, and we use a 3P kind of an approach where we look at the person, the position, and the performance, and then together we take a holistic look at and say that okay, where the person should be. What the person is currently and what the person should be, and what is the movement we need to make. The in-year performance we try to compensate through the rewards, the bonus, and we look at potential very heavily while looking at the increase.
Right, and if I'm right, you would be using the compensation module of success factors again to do the compa ratio and to compare the different position salaries, right, and streamlining them.
So right now we are using the roles. We have created the catalog of roles with success factor for doing that. But the compensation model is something we are still work in progress. We have not fully implemented it, but that's something directionally we go into, because right now we are still using some part in the platform and some part we are doing manually.
Right. Okay. Good luck to that implementation of that part. I move back to Mr. Chandel. This is a question from one curious audience. We know the answer, but still they want to know from you. What technology solutions are used in your organization for the performance management system?
Yeah.
Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you are able to hear?
Okay. Yes.
Okay.
So we have implemented the complete suite of success factors.
We are getting an echo from both your devices. Okay.
Okay, I'll switch off one at least. Yeah, so we have on-site system, which is SAP, which is the backend. And for the front end, we have implemented success factors, and we have done 100% performance planning to compensation planning to payouts on success factor.
Okay. Thank you, sir. So I have one interesting question to both our speakers today. They're asking, how do you take care of employee satisfaction when the rating is the same, but the increment varies?
Theoretically, a good situation. Practically, it doesn't happen that way.
Yes.
Yeah. So no. So there are two things. If somebody thinks that performance management system 100% objective, I think is not living in the realistic world. Second, subjectivity, managers will not use subjectivity, also is not realistic. So what we have done is, while we give the framework, we have given a certain kind of, and that's part of the empowerment of the managers, that they can adjust to a certain degree the compensation of the individual. So they get the list, they are able to see online what each individual as per the framework gets. They have the freedom to adjust to a certain degree depending on the performance of the individuals, the compensation increase individuals in their teams. But this is only available to the people at the middle and the senior management levels. Keeping the kitty at the department or the unit level the same, because that is defined in the beginning itself. So managers have that. They also must see and they must reward people who put in extraordinary efforts. Yeah. So theoretically, you can say that the target setting can be very objective. Even target setting cannot be objective because it is based on the market estimates. You have an individual working in one of the regions, market share is, say, for example, 20%. On the other hand, you have another region or another territory where in a market with 80% market share. Now, how do you do that?
Right.
Can you be fair? It's very difficult to say that. But you need to be seen to be fair. And that's why these managers are given that freedom. One, at the time of objective setting itself. And that's why I said that we have started insisting on when the targets are set, it is done in the intact teams. They all understand why somebody's target is moving from 20 to is far more critical than somebody moving from 80 to 85%. And so are the rewards.
Right. Right. I mean that the situation which you explained, of course, is quite common in most of the industries, wherein you have a difficult patch for a salesperson to achieve, and then you have an easier patch with a larger market share. How do you explain to this person that his target is more, and he has achieved it, and this person has a difficulty in achieving it, and he needs to be rewarded better? So end of the day, it is about employee satisfaction, and no two employees are satisfied, and it is a known fact that as humans we are never satisfied with whatever we get. At the end of the day, we always want more. So thanks so much for your answer, sir. I would like to ask Anindya the same question. Mr. Anindya, can you tell us how do you take care of this employee satisfaction aspect in your organization of 26,000 plus employees?
Yeah. Again, it's no easy answers, but one of the things we try to do is create alignment. By alignment, I mean that we have the bonus, the annual bonus, which is the variable pay linked to the individual performance, to the function performance, the business performance, and overall the company performance. And there are different weights are there. As you at the junior level, you have a larger percentage linked to the individual performance, and as you go senior, maybe at the management council level, there are no individual performance, which is totally dependent on the business performance and your function performance. So this is one of the ways we create alignment, and we try to say that, okay, if the organization doesn't do well or your business doesn't do well, it doesn't matter even if you have done well individually, we will swim or sink as a team. So that's one of the things we do from a bonus perspective. So far as the increments are concerned, which are much more individualized, as you said, that we have tried to explain the 3P model to the employees, and it has been on good success, and they are now understanding that every person is different. Every person brings different skills and competencies to the table. And that's why even if everything is same, we can't really compare, because every one individual is unique. One is particularly strong in the front ending, some is very strong in the process, somebody brings unique leadership skills, and they need to be accordingly uniquely compensated for the fact. So the 3P kind of a model is working well, and we are creating conversations around it.
Okay. So I would like to ask one more question from the audience, which is about, do you do development planning during the performance management cycle? Is it done separately as a standalone?
Yeah, so development planning, say what we do is during the goal setting stage itself, we encourage the associates to take at least one development plan for the year, where we said that while the ownership is the associates, but the organization is going to support you, whether you require any funding or whether you require exposure or leave or any other things to drive towards that end. And again, in the middle of the year and towards the end of the year, there is a check-in where we ask the associate where he or she has progressed with respect to that goal. So to that extent, the development planning is woven into the system. Also, the feed is given to our leadership development team, who takes the inputs and aggregates at a macro level to find out what are the needs at an organization, and then they develop transitions programs around it.
Right. So over to you, Mr. Chandil, on the same question. You had already said that development planning is part of it. So the audience wants to know whether you do it in the same cycle as performance management, or is it a standalone?
So we have decoupled the development from the financial performance review.
Okay.
During the month of March, April, when the targets are being reviewed, the primary discussions is around targets and both the targets setting for this and the targets, the review of the targeting year. While when the midterm review is going on in the month of September, at that time the primary purpose of the discussions and the dialogue between the employee and the manager is about development.
Right. So essentially, it is about development during the discussion of the performance management cycle, but it is in alignment with it.
Yeah. So the primary discussions during March, April is with the goal setting and the targets review. During September, October, which is the midterm review. So at that time, the targets are also discussed, but whether it is on track, off track, so it's a very broad discussion. Large part of the discussion, development and development planning.
Okay.
So it helps in avoiding that one gets colored with the other. So we didn't want that the development discussion, because of the rewards, because at that point in time, if you are discussing on one hand about the targets and then you say, now let's discuss development, the mindset is very different.
Right. So your perspective is exactly mine as well. So thank you so much. So there is one question here from the audience. They are asking about, interestingly, that startups are have been doing this for quite a few years, and this is just a concept which have come in the other industries. What is your comment on this? Saying that whether the bell curve is actually contextual, or is it how do you think that it should be working?
I don't know where people get these ideas that the startups have been doing your stuff. I'm working with quite a lot of startups, incidentally. Hardly any startup uses a structured performance management system, believe me. I'm in very close touch with a couple of startups, and they're all in the range of between 100 crores to 1500 crores. If somebody is talking about the e-commerce companies, which have become pretty large because of the scale that they had to go into, then it's a different matter. They are not startups, actually. The Flipkarts of the world and all these Olas of the world, they are not startups. They have reached a certain stage, and the size of the organization, the scale of the organization has become and geographically distributed. So they are doing it very differently. So in those companies, so in the startups, the number of people is very small normally, yeah, and the founder or the founders, they know individuals mostly one-on-one. In those cases, they are able to do individually rather than a very complex systems like we devise over a period of time to deal with the spread of the organizations that we have.
Right. So so this person who has asked this question has probably read it somewhere, or maybe it's their personal experience about startups. So I'd like to move to
newspapers. They don't report the whole thing. Yeah, they report lies also.
Okay, so I have a question for you, Mr. Anindya. There is a question around one of the reasons for doing away with the bell curve was the system was more on categorization of performance instead of evaluating performance. Since you continue to go ahead with the bell curve, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, no, as I said that we had a 5-point scale earlier, and that was actually categorizing people. But we are saying that we are okay with categorizing people as superlative who are really done well, and everybody says that fellow is a star, and the people who are not pulling their weight. And these two, we really want to call them out. And everybody else is really good. They are solid guys, and we value them. But if you also read Jack Welch's book Straight from the Gut, he also mentioned that there's a 3-part. There's nothing wrong with that, and we have superstars, and we have great guys, which is around 70-75% of the organization, and we have 5 or 10% of the organization who are not pulling their weight.
Right. So there's also a follow-up question for you. Sulochana asks, how do you evaluate the how part of the performance, and what takes precedence while evaluating? Sorry, you got disconnected, sir.
Hello, am I there?
I think the last 10 seconds we lost you.
Okay. So what I was telling, so far as labeling of people is concerned, what our philosophy is that we are comfortable with calling our guys who are really doing well as the star performers, and we want to identify them and make them and tell them that they are doing very well. And we also wanted to tell the people who are not doing so well and they need to pull their weight up, who are at the bottom of the curve. And the rest of the people are saying, okay, you are doing well and we value you and we want to cherish you. You are part of the family. So this is the simple message we want to convey. And within that, we don't want to further categorize and create further buckets on it. So it is the star performers and the people who are not doing well, and the rest of the people are doing well. Thank you. We cherish your association with us.
So essentially, you're saying that whether the bell curve is continued or not, you're just valuing the people in whichever bucket they are. You've simplified the buckets, and you are making sure the employees are getting whatever you have communicated to them.
That's right. Yeah.
So there is someone from the audience called Sulochana who has asked you specifically, how do you evaluate the how part of performance, and what takes precedence while evaluating the performance, the what or the how?
Okay, that's a great question. So the how part of the performance, again, we have, as we mentioned, we have linked to the values, and there is a set of questions against each value. Like, for example, there is a value on collaboration, and so there's a series of questions the manager has to ask whether the person has demonstrated that value during that period of the year. For example, the person has picked fight, and the person is very arrogant, and the person gets things done, but the 360 feedback is very bad. So in that case, the person's overall rating will be dropped. So the idea is that we take a holistic call. There is no mathematics. There is no 30-70, 60-40 or 50-50. But we are saying at the end of it, after considering both performance and behavior, is the person outstanding, the person good, or the person at the bottom of the curve. So we encourage the managers to take a holistic call.
Right, and this behavioral aspect of it again gets defined at the beginning, because again it could be a topic of debate in the future. So a sales guy could always say that like, I need to be aggressive. This is how I'm expected to be, whereas a person in the production may say that this is how I can get the work done from the workers. So how do you define this bit?
No, we have kept it very simple as of now. Overall, we have a set of competencies, which we call it a leadership essentials, where every person working in Cipla should exhibit those supply essentials. Now, it might take a different view if you are a manufacturing guy versus you are an HR guy versus you are a sales guy, but essentially the set of behaviors is the same across the organization. It's a one enterprise behavior.
Right. So you're basically looking at organizational level competencies, which everyone has to align to.
That's right. And it's very simple. It's like things as simple as enterprise mindset, things as simple as collaboration, and things as simple as innovation. There's very simple terms, but how are you exhibiting it in your respective roles?
In your daily work. Okay.
Yeah, in daily work. Yeah.
I would like to ask Mr. Shandel a question. We have a question about the startup, follow-up on the startup part. So how do you go about starting a structured performance management system in a startup or an SME or an MSM? Can you share some approaches?
So in my view, when the organization is simple and smaller, it's better that targets are shared. The targets are shared means these are shared targets amongst the team members. That's number one. Number two, keep those very simple and directly related to 3 or 4 key critical business parameters. Number 3, look at these targets not just as an annual exercise, but as a continuous exercise. Because the startups normally are expected to respond very fast to the market conditions.
Right.
And they need to be far more agile and nimble. And therefore, it's better that the targets are set in such a way that you are able to even modify the targets or even do away with the targets if they are not working well in line with the company strategy. So normally, my suggestion to the startups have been that you set up a plan for the year, but set fixed targets for a quarter and indicative targets for the next 2 or 3 quarters or 4 quarters on continuous basis. That way, I have seen startups are able to respond to the market conditions far better than if you set fixed targets for the whole year and then you find it difficult to change.
Right, right. So another thing is, how do you look at the continuous feedback and review process of the goals as well as the performance, and how do you tie it in with the year-end appraisal to avoid skewing of the rating on the higher side?
No, so it depends on the size, complexity of the organization, as well as what is the industry cycle. So in our industry, for example, the industry cycle is considered to be anywhere between 7-8 years to 9 years. So it sees a full sine wave curve of up and down. I'm saying about the industry as a whole. At what stage is the industry going through, and what, as a company, you are targeting at what stage of that sine wave curve is very critical. And that will determine not only your strategy actions, but also the targets. So in such cases, you will look at some targets which are long-term. These could even be 2 years, 3 years, with milestones for the year and even for the quarter. Whereas some of the industries, they shift, or there are changes which are dramatic in a year or in 2 years. In those are to look at the targets on quarterly or even half-yearly basis.
Right. So essentially, it depends on the industry cycle, and it depends on the maturity of the industry that the cycle is. So considering both these industries, manufacturing as well as pharma, both your industries are quite traditional, and then that's why the cycle time is larger. But if you look at a startup or a professional services industry, it would be much different. So
people think that automotive industry is very traditional, but the kind of shifts and disruption this industry is seeing, it hasn't seen in 100 years.
Yeah, at least especially in the last decade, it has been quite turbulent.
Yeah, so the technology disruptions are changing the entire landscape of the automotive industry. And if you see, the value drivers of the automotive industry are shifting rapidly.
Right. So we have 4 more minutes, sir. So I might have one last question for both of you. What is the thought process on increments based on work anniversary and not on the financial year? Quite a creative question.
In one of my previous organizations, we used to have that. So, and we tried both. So one we tried for 2 years, it was, which was linked to the work anniversary. Then we even tried that, let's link it to the individual's either birthday or the anniversary. Both did not work over a period of time. Because when you do your business planning, you do it for a year, 2 years, etc., because you don't drive the funding of your business, market seeding, technology shifts that you drive from your company into the industry, those don't happen with those anniversaries. So it's better to align with the industry cycles than with the individual
anniversary.
Absolutely.
Right. What about your opinion, Mr. Anindya?
No, in fact, we around 6 or 7 years back, Cipla had this anniversary system, and there was a very interesting concept which was there, which was called the ask system. Now, whenever you needed an increase, you are supposed to go to the manager and ask that, okay, I have finished my anniversary and I deserve this increase. And there is a legend which is there that either you get the full increase or you then are sent back saying that we are not convinced, and you come back. Or in some cases, you are asked to leave, that we can't afford you. So that was the kind of legend which was there. I don't know how much true or false it was, but that was the system which was prevalent when the organization was much smaller. But now with an organization of 26,000 people with a global footprint across different geographies and different culture, anniversary kind of thing will be almost unmanageable from a scale and complexity. And we need to align ourselves to the cascade of the budget and the cadence of the reviews, and whether we are following the annual cycle or the any of the financial cycle. So we have to, otherwise the business planning cadence and the annual cadence goes off, then it becomes very difficult to align, and it creates an administrative overhead.
Right. So thank you so much, both of you. I hope you have enjoyed as much as we have enjoyed this, because just considering one concept of the bell curve, we've got so many different questions from the audience, and thank you so much for sharing your perspectives about continuing the bell curve as well as rejecting the bell curve, and how it has worked well in both of your organizations.
So incidentally, your last question doesn't go with the bell curve. You can't have bell curve if you have distributed your rewards and whatever performance management review process is throughout the year.
If it's on the work anniversary,
you can see at some point in time of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much, sir. Anindya, any final words from you?
No, my thoughts are essentially again, this is something which is going to evolve, and it depends on what stage the organization is, what is the need of the talent refresh, what are the maturity of the managers, and the inclination of the organization to focus on whether it's a developmental focus or it is focused more on near-term performance. So various strategic elements and the focus of the organization will get into the design of the performance system, and whether you will require tools like normalization or not.
Right. So essentially, all of us, whether we follow the bell curve or not, we are striving towards simplifying the entire process, performance management and evaluation process, and trying to tie it up as much as possible with the organization's business strategy, as well as its the dynamic goals which keep changing through the year in every organization. Over to you, Anushree. Hello. Yeah, over to you, Anushree. Thank you.
Sure. Sorry, there was some technical glitches. So I wish we could have stretched this session a little more, because there's a lot of questions that are flowing in. However, due to paucity of time, we would have to wrap today's session. So I would like to thank our speakers, Gajendra, Anindya, and Nitya, for your great insights. And we would also like to thank our today's webcast partner, SAP SuccessFactors, and again our speakers, and also our participants for making this webcast a success. Meanwhile, you can provide your feedback in the survey link provided in the chat section, because your input matters. Stay tuned for many more such exciting sessions. That concludes today's webcast. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you, People Matters. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Pleasure.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.